Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some of you. This is the session, the Ubuntu and Engage Ubuntu session of March 11. Use of technology to end gender-based violence. I'm sorry, I think there is a problem here with the this slide. Organized by Red Dot Foundation and with this amazing team of speakers and panelists. They will introduce themselves in a minute. I want to welcome and thank you on behalf of the Men Engage Global Alliance for being in this session, for our speakers and presenters. This is a global event. They will be available in recording. Please follow us, follow the event in the hashtag Ubuntu Symposium. It's really great that this conversation continue online. And by the way, the theme of this session is about a lot about online work and technology. So thank you, ElsaMarie, for putting this together. We are very happy that you are able to share with us and with your colleagues all this knowledge and experience. So over to you, ElsaMarie.
Thank you, Osvaldo, and thank you, Men Engage, the Ubuntu Symposium, for having us. I think this is a very important topic of technology, the use of technology to address or end gender-based violence. Today, we live in a digital world, and we cannot think of our lives without technology. But unfortunately, it can be used in ways that are productive and ways that are not. So we are going to deep dive in this session. My name is ElsaMarie DSilva. I am the founder of Red Dot Foundation. So I started on this journey about 8 years ago when there was a horrific gang rape that took place in my country, India. And a woman died because of it. And that got me thinking about the issue of gender-based violence, sexual violence. And one of the things I identified was that most of us experience different forms of sexual harassment, abuse, and violence in our daily lives, but we don't necessarily speak up about it. And we hardly go to the police to make a complaint. And what if we were to use technology? And in this case, I launched Safecity, a crowd map where anyone could anonymously share their story. And these would then get placed on a map as location-based trends. So could we use technology like this and information like crowdsourced data to make a difference at the ground level? So just to give you an update, we have about 19,000 stories on our crowd map, and you can access it at safecity.in or download it from the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store under Safecity, one word. And you can check out in your area if there are any stories. Of course, it's a global app, but we have the largest collection of stories in India and Kenya. And that's why I have Tanya here today to also share. I've also invited another friend of mine, Jane Anyango. If she's free, she will come to also share what she has learned using this data. But it's very interesting how data and technology can be used to make that change at the ground level. But before we dive in, I want to introduce two of our three panelists. The third one will be joining in a little later. But we have Tanya Maringo from Kenya, and she is the executive director and founder of Blink International. And we have Ritu David, who is the Data Duck, the founder of the Data Duck, which is a tech company that uses inclusive design in their design of the application. So I'm going to ask Tanya first to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work, and then Ritu, you can follow her.
Okay, thank you, Elsa. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. This is a great follow-up from the International Women's Day discussion that is happening globally. And I'm excited to just introduce our work and hopefully form synergies with all of you out there. So as Elsa mentioned, I founded Blink International not too long ago. at the end of 2018. And it's a social enterprise. So it's been growing. It's based in Nairobi, Kenya, and we use technology to prevent mental illnesses, increase access to mental health services, and reduce discrimination of people affected by mental health challenges. And mental health is very diverse. It's inclusive in sexual and gender-based violence, in child protection issues, in a whole cohort of issues and scenarios. So in relation to this discussion, a key part of our programs involves working with children and youth to enhance gender understanding and equality through a dynamic life skills program. So this program not only seeks to provide a safe space, but also actively seeks to eradicate harmful stereotypes that limit children's potential to become problem solvers and innovators within their communities. So this was important for us because we realized that where do these gender issues stem from? And it comes right from the root as a child. What are you being told in your families? How are you being brought up? And that sort of thing. So we stimulate these gender sensitive discussions among young children. And I know that because we've collected data in our communities and we've read reports, for example, from UNICEF that states that gender stereotypes emerge during preschool years and are deeply entrenched by adulthood. So what we see at our level, adult level, is the repercussions of those stereotypes. And it's very hard to get them out at that advanced level. So our solution is to just improve the socialization of gender-based culture through our programs, especially in informal settlements where they may not have access to information that, for example, I do. And so we have found a striking link between mental health and sexual and gender-based violence through our initiatives in mental health. So what we do is we just give these children an opportunity to discover who they are freely and securely without being encumbered, by these retrogressive talk and being pushed to careers, for example, that they may not have ascribed to ideally. So we expose girls to alternative lifestyles and training opportunities, for example, in STEM-related subjects. And we also have like this very unique program where we're partnering with a tech organization to provide these coding opportunities for them. So they may know that they can also be included in this sort of projects, and it's not secluded to boys only. And I'm sure in your relative backgrounds, for example, girls are supposed to aspire towards marriage. Like that is your highest aspiration. It really baffles me, honestly. And boys are supposed to be innovators and leaders and take control, and it's something that I think needs to be eradicated at that childhood level, because even in my own age group, that is exactly how men think. So I've encountered that myself, being a leader in my industry or in my organization. I get this reluctance to work with me because I'm a woman. And, among many other scenarios. So this is something that I'm very passionate about. So we also work with boys to deal with toxic masculinity, because we understand that sometimes it's not their fault, And so we work with them just to help them to become more empathetic human beings, express themselves, and support women, So this is the sort of thing that we have a multifaceted and inclusive approach that includes all genders based on our research data and engagement. And finally, Elsa, do I have more time?
Can we stop here and pass it to Ritu, because we can then explore more questions a little later.
Hi, I'm Ritu David. I'm the founder of the Data Duck. We're based out of Melbourne and Mumbai. And I've recently started Alum Bloom, which is a closed community app for alumni and other groups. And I guess for me, the way in which what we do overlaps with gender and impact is we facilitate people and bring their ideas and their goals to fruition using tech, using design, and using behavioral analysis and data. So we found that a lot of phenomenal people and phenomenal organizations around the world are not having the kind of impact they could have, are not being able to be as efficient or get as much revenue, get as much funding, because they're not tech first. In a digital world, they're not tech first. So that's what I guess the data duck does. It facilitates, and we're not the champions, we're not subject matter experts in impact, but we are the people who will enable you to do what you're organized and to fulfill your purpose as an organization and as a person. And I'm very proud of that facilitator role, because what it allows us to do is solve several problems. And I think that I've always been too impatient to be able to go really deep on one problem. So instead of going really, really deep on a particular problem, we're able to facilitate impact across. We've worked recently with Safecity, and it's been, it's taken my team through 2020. We really needed something to work on that was larger than ourselves, something that wasn't about business bottom line, was about share prices, was about profit. And Elsa really came in and gave us a project that lifted all our souls and got us through the crisis. We're all working remotely in tough conditions, and it was fantastic to work on impact. Yeah, and I completely agree with Tanya. I feel that Debbie Sterling is a mentor of mine, and she has completely changed the way we look at early childhood by disrupting the pink aisle. I remember being given Barbie dolls. Like, I don't think I ever asked for one. I was just given dolls, and I was given pink things. And I remember wanting to play with trucks and then being called a boy. And I sort of, moved away from STEM at a very early age, not developing skills like spatial awareness skills, reasoning skills, because I was pushed away from them. So really, really glad that someone's bringing up the way societies, and someone's working on the way societies shape us as individuals and shape the way we can impact the world.
Thank you, Ritu and Tanya, for those introductory remarks. What we are going to do is, since we are a small group, I will ask them a few questions. We will have a bit of a discussion just to set context on this vast topic of technology to address gender-based violence. And then I would like to invite some of you here to also share your views, because I can see activists from around the world here, and I really would also like to hear from you how you're using technology. But just to set context, I, as a founder of Safecity and advocating for the use of technology, I don't think you can just put technology out there and expect to solve the problem, because the problem is deep rooted and it has multi layers. It stems from the patriarchal mindset that favors males over females, and that is reflected in many statistics, right from femicide to child marriage to dowry deaths to participation in the labor force to leadership in political and business circles. And just to give you an idea, how does technology affect, on one hand, and why it is important to understand this? Because if we are looking at technology as a solution, if women don't have access to that technology or don't understand how to use it, they don't have knowledge of their digital rights, what use is that technology going to be? So just to give you an idea, according to the Digital Empowerment Foundation in India, they did a survey recently, and they said 71% of the girls do not own a mobile phone because they cannot afford it. 81% of families say they cannot afford a mobile phone, while 79% do not have a computer at home. And financial constraints further alienate young girls from technology. 84% of girls do not have the money to spend on internet access. Furthermore, notably, 65% of teachers and 60% of community organizations say that being a girl is a factor in accessing digital technology, as most parents felt that a mobile phone is unsafe and an unhealthy distraction for an adolescent girl. Now, why am I sharing this statistic? Because before you even look at technology as an enabler to solve gender-based violence, what is stopping women and girls from actually using that technology? It's this same reflection of the socio-cultural norms and values that get reflected in the virtual or the digital space. And secondly is how, just by virtue of somebody holding a mobile phone in many parts of my country, it actually aggravates the violence. It is an invitation to uh, perpetrate violence because that girl is loose. And they have said it as well, the political leaders. So, in that sense, I wanted to ask Tanya, you actually teach young girls to code. Why did you start with that? Why do you impart these skills? And how do you think it is important in this entire inclusion and access debate?
Because I think girls have been sort of raised to channel themselves towards certain professions. So more social-based professions that are caregivers or nurturing professions, and they lack the exposure to other income-generating activities and other tech solutions in which the world is advancing in. So what it does is it limits them and it leaves them behind. It leaves them behind on the trajectory that men are using and taking to sort of include themselves in the financial space, in the tech space, and to innovate and to create. So they're left out of the decision-making process because they don't understand the technology. They're left out of it because they have no interest. The excuse they give is that girls are not interested. And I don't think there's ever been a time where you've asked, hey, do you find this interesting? It's like, no, it's just assumed because they'd rather cook, you know? And so you find that even in schools, because we interact sometimes in schools and we ask, so what are the extracurricular activities that girls do? And they say, oh no, girls are in the kitchen, they clean. The boys, we give them other duties, that are more manly and that sort of thing. So that's why I felt that we need to give them that exposure to technology and its advancements and see where that interest could take them.
Which is great, because when they get comfortable with technology, then they can use it as an ally. They can use it as a tool, right? So, Ritu,
exactly.
In your view, as a creator of such apps, of creator of these technologies, how can you build it into the design that it makes it easy for women and girls who are not used to these devices or find it intimidating to actually use it?
Sure. I'll answer that quickly and then move on to the access of devices thing, because you're right. If they don't have access to devices, then any technology that we build for them is irrelevant. So the first thing that we've done, we've done in the last 2 years was a survey to see how do women and girls in rural India access technology on their phones. And even if they do have access to a phone, what stops them from using anything apart from WhatsApp or YouTube? And a vast majority said that reading and writing English, or just the fact that they, number one, are scared that they'll make a mistake and break something. There's a lot of fear. And it's, I think the fear comes from a space of not being able to read, not being confident in how to navigate the screen, having feature phones and then having access to a smartphone for a very short period of time. So one of the things that we did was create voice interfaces. So the UI, the user interface, instead of it being visual, it's voice-led and voice-enabled. So it's like talking to a buddy. Now that's a new technology that we've created to just increase inclusion. It's also used for senior citizens and those with visual impairments. Now, Elsa, you brought on, like, you hit the nail on the head when you said there's a lot of issues when it comes to accessing the actual device. So I think when one of the things is to be able to have applications or things on the mobile that are okay from a societal perspective for young girls to be using. Because we can be renegades and give them everything, but if that stops them from accessing the phone. So there's a lot of religious texts that seem to be okay for young girls to be reading, you know. So I think some apps that facilitate digital literacy through the use of, say, the Bible and interactive things like that, that are okay with the broader community, it just removes the constraints of access to a digital device, and then enabling a voice enabled interface gives the girls that sort of confidence to move on.
So just to add to what Ritu is saying is, and welcome Harish, we'll come to you in a minute. But just to add to what Ritu is saying, you know, the access to technology is a real problem where either you don't have a device, or you may be illiterate, or you may not have internet connectivity. All three are very, very valid. But what Ritu is saying is that if you did have the device and if you did have access to the technology, often your community or your society will not allow you to access these apps. And they use surreptitious sites to mask the app. And we actually got a request from one party where they said, can you make it a fashion app? So when their family sees them, they think that they're opening up a fashion app, but actually it is an app to report domestic violence, for example. And at Safecity, what we've realized is in the communities that we work, either in low-income communities or in rural communities where the women don't necessarily have access, we have actually had to put physical talking boxes, what we call talking boxes. We put physical boxes in communities. People put anonymous notes, and we digitize it on our site so that you can then visually analyze the data and give it back to the community so that they can understand the scale of the problem in their own neighborhood. So there are two aspects to it. It's collecting the data and then again accessing the data in the solving of the problem. And we'll come to the solutions a little bit in a moment. But Harish, welcome. What we're talking about is the use of technology to address gender-based violence, and you represent a community which is the LGBTQ. I know you don't represent the whole spectrum of the LGBTQ community, but in India, for example, till about 18 months ago, your community wasn't even confident that they could express themselves as part of the community. So how can technology, or first, why don't you share your work with us and how this theme of technology can be useful in your community?
Thank you so much, Elsa, and thank you for making me a part of this wonderful discussion. I think that technology has been a great enabler for the LGBT community because of the apps that exist. When it comes to dating apps, when it comes to, because previously I remember when I was growing up in India, which didn't have which were just speaking the word gay, spelling out the word gay was a taboo in many parts of the country. Now we have reached a stage where where I can just switch on my app and I can feel the community in my midst, whether it's Tinder, whether it's Grindr, whether it's any of these apps which are basically very close, where you actually know the proximity of the person, so you don't feel like an island by itself anymore. And not just for dating, there are a lot many other apps also where you build, where you have the sense of collaboration, even when it comes to different subsets in an app. Like for instance, long back, we had something known as Yahoo Messenger, which had a chat box, which was quite active. And in the chat box, we had a group which meant, which was a gay chat box group, chat group. Now the chat groups have gone obsolete, but I still remember how the chat group became a conduit for different conversations, many of which was sexual in nature, but a lot of it was about actually knowing that another person who thinks like me existed. So I think that it's important to see people who are like us, to collaborate with, see the differences in the likeness. Like, for instance, meet people who are like us and yet notice that they're unique and there's something that's different. Because otherwise, we tend to, technology helps us understand diversity within the technology itself, within ourselves. Because many a times what happens is, when you think about a woman, then you think about a woman in a certain way. You think about a gay man, you think about a gay man in a certain way. So this actually breaks those stereotypes and understands that there are many types of us. They're not just one type of us. So I think technology is an enabler, not just in building awareness, it's also an enabler in breaking the stereotype that there is a stereotype. There are no stereotypes of anything in technology.
And Harish, that's a very important point, because before you joined, we started off our discussion on understanding the background on why there is such a violence and the patriarchal mindsets. And I've seen that on Safecity, for example, through the storytelling of individual stories, it helps to understand the spectrum of abuse, that there is not one kind of abuse. There is non-verbal, there's verbal, physical, there's online, there's sexual assault and rape. And it gives a vocabulary to your experience. And where there is silence earlier, it allows you to then find resonance, find a community of support, maybe courage to make that step to break your own silence or seek help. And I'm sure these groups that you're talking about also enabled a lot of people to come out, right? And
True.
maybe even access peer support.
True. I think it's important, because once we know that there are people who are like us, then you would go and access those support systems. First is to put yourself out there and to understand that there are people like you, and then you will understand that there are challenges. We are always in the lookout for people who are like us and who are facing challenges like us. And the moment and the kind of support systems that peer support groups can create, no expert, no psychologist would be able to create that kind of a support system that a peer support group can create. So you might have differences, you might have challenges. Sometimes a lot of technology comes with a lot of challenges as well. So it's not a very easy thing to navigate through technology without the threat of technology as well. But at the same time, the kind of benefits that it can reap because of something like that, it becomes incredibly important, not just for men, but also for all kinds of men, all kinds, trans men, trans women, speaking about bisexual. I mean, looking at men from a sexuality perspective, also from a diverse lens, and not just a monolithical approach to anything. I think it's a great enabler that way.
Thank you. And the importance of education, because in India, for example, our education curriculum does not touch upon gender, sexuality in great detail. And therefore, there is poor understanding of, the many kinds of violence or the violations that are perpetrated because of it. Tanya, have you seen, because you mentioned that in your community, that's what you all are talking about, the toxic masculinity, but you're also doing a lot of this sexuality education and gender education. Share how it helps.
Right. It's been a turbulent journey, I have to admit, because most schools are reluctant to have open discussions about sexuality, and we're not a school, but we're supposed to work with them, without necessarily aggravating their policies, and sort of endangering their children. So there's this mix of, you have to work with with parents, community leaders, for them to also understand the importance of talking about sexual and gender-based violence and the importance of sexuality. I can give you a personal scenario. One time during the COVID-19 pandemic, schools were closed, and communities were trying to engage their children proactively and productively. There were increased cases of teenage pregnancies, and people didn't know what to do. So community leaders came together and they put all the children in a group. And I happened to be there as I was just, we were trying to launch our project. So, and the narrative that they were expressing was that it's the girls' fault that they are getting sexually abused. It's their fault that they are raped. Why are you dressing the way you're dressing? And I was really shocked. I'm like, this is the education we are giving our children, and it's the girls' fault. So I feel like our program has sort of deviated from that narrative, and we are making it more comprehensive, and we are empowering girls to say that you have a right to say no. This was actually very critical in many of our training programs. We're like, it's okay to say no. You won't be perceived the wrong way, and you don't have to be overly cautious about what you wear, because there was emphasis about the girls being provocative. And they're little girls. So I think it has been impactful in that sense. A lot more needs to be done. And in that sense, it also, you need to work with the top level. So, which is why we are now trying to engage parents and also community leaders so that they can join us in expressing the same narrative. And it's done from our whole section of the community. So, yeah.
So I want to ask Ritu Osvaldo's question. He says that in high-income countries like the US, there is concern about young women and men using too much digital technology and social media, which affects their health. And I know you worked on Calm, which is a mindfulness app. So that's why I'm directing the question to you. In other parts of the world with less material resources, is it rather the opposite?
I suppose it's wherever we hang out, we're omni-channel beings, we don't exist in our physical selves separately and have emotions separately in the physical world, and then we come on digital platforms and have separate emotions. So wherever we are, we face psychological and sociological trauma. In the States, as Osvaldo said, we spend more time in our beings online. And so, yes, that trauma does take place on social and on digital platforms. In parts of the world where we spend more time in the offline world, that trauma takes place offline. The trauma will continue to take place no matter, even if we create another, another universe, right? Apart from physical and digital, it will continue to take place because we as humans will behave the way we behave, no matter where we are. And I think the whole technology to end gender-based violence or to reduce gender-based violence, a big part of that is what Elsa's doing in terms of not victim shaming, giving victims and survivors a space to talk and not feel like they're the only ones this happened to, giving survivors tools like safety tips and helping them with legal resources, police resources. But another really important role that tech can play is what sort of content do young people consume? I've sort of given up hope on the older generations because changing behavior and changing psychology is really, really challenging, but shaping it isn't that hard. So it's how are we shaping the younger generations, the 0 to 5, the 5 to 10? How are we shaping them as elders in the community, as parents, as just as aunts and uncles, as godfathers, just people that children come in contact with, teachers? whatever that whole ecosystem is, how much are our biases being transferred down like a baton of god awful evil from like generation to generation? And that's what I mean. Yesterday, just in the physical world, tiny example, my great friend who's Ivy League MBA, lived all over the world, now is in India. Her 5-year-old daughter was playing on the swings with a boy, and she went and snatched her daughter down. She's like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" And the daughter had no idea what she was doing wrong. She was on a swing in a dress. So the daughter said, "But mama, like, what am I doing?" And she's like, he's a boy, it doesn't matter, go and change. So it's the sort of, she's already ashamed, like her face fell from the joy. I don't know how we use digital, do we use tech to facilitate conversations like this? I feel like we're always preaching to the choir. So how do we go out to mainstream human beings, right? Who aren't talking about gender, and how do we make this a more normal conversation to have things like a FAQ on parenting and FAQ on how to deal with children?
You raised some really important points, Ritu, that our biases are the same, whether it's in the physical world and the virtual world. And some of it stems from ignorance, but some of it is just, I mean, you can't say that this friend of yours is ignorant, but it is the pressure to conform to socio-cultural norms. And I wanted to ask Harish this question. You, because of the nature of the community that you represent, I know get a lot of hate and trolling on social media. You also, when we talk about trauma, that trauma is aggravated, right? Because people, not only are you experiencing it, but others who are your followers are also experiencing it. Can you share a little bit about this, the trauma in the digital space, and what are the ways to cope with it?
I think that's why I said the digital space is both a boon and a bane, and especially when it comes to taboo topics like sex and sexuality and gender. I don't know why it's tabooed, but it's tabooed, and it gets very difficult in those spaces because of excessive trolling at times. Sometimes your identity gets compromised, where I know of many people who would open their apps, and they would know that there are queer people in the vicinity, so they'll take screenshots and share it with other people. So the only way to deal with it is to one, do not try to run away from it. Okay, you can't tomorrow say that, you know what, I'm going to take a digital detox and everything is going to be sorted, because you'll take a detox but you'll come back to the digital world, because that's the reality of today. You really cannot not be in the digital world, and for various reasons. Okay, it might no, you might not need to be there every day and be obsessed with it, but you cannot not be there, not access to the digital world at all. So I think one is to raise the focus on mental health, to raise the focus on to make it normal for people to come and say that I'm depressed, that I need that I need mental health counseling, that I need medical support when it comes to visiting a psychiatrist, maybe. So I think normalization to wishing the evil away is not going to be the solution at all. We live in a digital world, and this digital world is here to stay. It's only going to proliferate further. It's not going to go away. Even if you wish it dead, it's not going to die. So what we need is a parallel conversation on mental health, and to make these conversations normal when we are speaking about sex, sexuality, gender, or anything, or mental health. Make it absolutely, you know it was considered, I think it should be practically spoken at every space, to ask for help and to tell people, like, My psychologist's name is Aarti, and my psychiatrist's name is Yashashri. And I think people need to put their doctors and this, just as you have your doctor's name, you should have your psychologist and psychiatrist names also embedded in your memory. And you should be speaking about it openly that you're seeking mental health assistance, because that's when you normalize these things. Each one of us should speak about it openly, that we all have been through mental health challenges, and that's only by normalizing that conversation would we be able to deal with it, because this problem is here to stay. We will face trolling, and especially if you belong to a marginalized community, and include, I mean, I would include also women as sometimes people who face maximum trolling, and I think it's important to speak up and to seek help and to build that community which speaks about mental health quite vociferously.
And I want to, tell everyone that, for example, in India, you can report any online crime, including trolling, not just to the platform owner like Facebook or whatever, but you can report it to the crime, the cyber crime unit in the government. So they have an online portal where you don't have to go to a police station. You can just go to the online portal and make a report over it. But that is only for online crime. And it's been quite effective. Tanya, earlier we spoke about the ecosystem where parents, teachers, and the others around cannot really support the children or the young people going through such crime because they themselves may be ignorant about it. Do you undertake any such programming to help build their understanding and their confidence in dealing with it?
Sure. Yes, they're absolutely one of our primary points of contact because we need their permission to engage their children anyway. So what we do is we have a comprehensive session with the parents and the community leaders if they're available. And what we do is we just give them a breakdown of our program and the topics and issues we'll be discussing. We sort of, just have a dialogue with them, and they can tell us the problems that they're experiencing and the confusion that they may have, because sometimes they're just confused, especially if you're dealing with parents from informal settlements. There's a bit of a generational gap. There's a bit of a lack of understanding on the how we are changing. The community is becoming more and more dynamic. So we sort of have those sessions with them. And then after the program, the children make a presentation and they talk about the issues that they have identified in the community. They say girls are exchanging sex in favor for food or sanitary towels, that sort of thing. And their parents are sitting there and they can hear it, and the community leaders. And so we tell them, we have this open discussion, and they're able to now see the problems and help. They come up with a comprehensive and collective problem solving, because as an organization we can't provide the solution solely, but as a community and as a collective we can come up now with the right solutions for them, and it becomes more just better for the whole community.
Thanks for sharing. So one of the ways that at Safecity we've used the data is, on a daily basis, we use various peer review apps like TripAdvisor or Yelp to make decisions on which hotel to stay, which restaurant to go to and eat, etc. And if we don't have a better understanding of location-based violence, how can we improve our own situational awareness to respond in the moment quickly and effectively? So as human beings, when faced with difficult circumstances, we respond in three ways. We fight back, we flee, or we freeze. And most women and girls actually freeze when confronted with sexual violence. And then later we beat ourselves up emotionally saying that was not an appropriate response. But if you had prior information based on these anonymous reports of, okay, near this railway station, there's high instances of groping, then you would be prepared to respond to groping in particular. And so when you are groped, I'm expecting you can twist that person's hand, or like many women have pins, safety pins, where they can poke people in crowded buses or trains. But it's not to avoid spaces, this information, but really to respond quickly. And the other one is, all of us are part of communities. We don't have to fight this battle by ourselves. Knowing that this incident or these incidents are happening on a recurring basis allows you to bring your community together and initiate the dialogue to say, what are you doing to protect me? And we've seen very interesting examples, right from art on walls near tea stalls, which are male-only spaces, to address staring and loitering. Or we have identified broken public toilets or broken street lights that were then fixed because the data was presented to the municipality. We've even got the police to change beat patrol timings. You don't need big data, but when confronted with the data, these authorities cannot really dispute it. And that's really the power of such tools. Now, what was the Me Too movement all about? The Me Too was a call to action where Lisa said, put your story out there on social media so that the world can know the extent of the problem. And the world did. And that led to a lot of policy changes, either at the country level or maybe within an organization. But in my view, that data is unstructured and it's hard to synthesize, hard to pinpoint. And I feel what we do at Safecity is not naming and shaming, but really putting this crowdsourced data back to the community so that they can use it in the way that they feel comfortable and design solutions that they take responsibility for. I know, Ritu, you have your hand up. So do you want to say something in this regard or add your own?
Sorry, it was the wrong reaction. I just wanted to say, yes, I absolutely freeze. It's happened to me before, so I completely get what you mean. If someone had warned me spatially, or just if I just knew the risks going in, I feel like I would have responded better.
But do you want to add to this? How can you make the tech more responsive or useful for individuals to report things like crime? Or even using, now AI is a big topic. How can we use AI in a very sensitive manner to include, not exclude, and not for punitive measures, but more for preventive solutions?
I think when we move away from stories and present hard data, it's difficult for policymakers, for police forces, for those people to whom we pay our taxes and expect services from. I think it's difficult for them to run away. And I think the whole preventative aspect also comes into conversations. If I were to say, do you know that 10% of girls who travel by public transport are sexually assaulted? Do you know that between noon and 1 o'clock in this crowded market, 30% of women get groped? These are conversation starters that that enable difficult conversations, rather than, oh, I know a girl who did this and this happened to her. And then, what we were saying before, all these labels get put, or all these questions get asked, like, what was she wearing? Or, what was she doing there in the first place? And, it must have been a one-off incident, or she must have pissed someone off. And so when we start to remove attributions of that victim deserved it, and start to look at cold hard statistics, it's really difficult to ignore. And it's very easy then for parents. I know that it's it's really horrible that we have to keep going back to reminding men that they have mothers, that they have sisters, that they have daughters, that they have wives. But it's then very easy to say that 1 in 4 women, and you have a wife, you have a mother, you have a daughter, you have a sister, you have 4. If 1 in 4 women face this, someone you really care about faces this. So now come back to the conversation and let's engage. So I think statistics enable conversation.
Sure. So whilst we are having the discussion, Osvaldo also wants if you could share resources in the chat section of digital sites that people can use for any of these, for mental health, for reporting of crime. Harish, do you want to add on what the LGBTQ community faces? I know till about 18 months ago, they wouldn't even come and report sexual violence on a public site. But yeah, how can technology assist?
I think when it comes to the LGBT community, even now, um, people are not aware. There's no data point that's available for how many queer women, of those women who get attacked, how many of those women are queer women? How many of those women have actually gotten? How many of those women are women who identify as women? I mean, are there women? Are there men who we have mistaken to be women? So I think it's the question of trans woman over there, the trans man over there. I think what is needed is understanding that even when you are speaking about so many women, even when Ritu is speaking about so many women per se who have been attacked, those many of those women could be queer women as well. So it's important for us to recognize that queer people exist in the intersections, and not just in the forefronts or the margins, but in the intersections of caste, religion, creed, and gender. So I think that's extremely important. So when you say a woman went out and complained, it could well be a queer woman, a queer Muslim woman, a queer Dalit woman, a queer economically challenged woman, a queer person with disability woman. So I think it could be so many people that's there. So I think that now with awareness, people are bringing their whole selves to the police station. Some of them, it has just started. It has not created a wave of sorts, but it's only the starting of the conversation. I also see a lot of women who have now started filing complaints against women in queer relationships. I have seen, though there's no legal recourse many a times, but at least they've started speaking at different forums of stalking and other things. There are men who have started complaining about men. The conversation has begun. But is this only a tip of the iceberg? Yes, it is. It has just begun, and it will take time for us, for corporations and individuals and organizations to start, to actually take the leap, to take the big leap. But I think as a conversation starter, it has begun, but we shouldn't be um, we shouldn't be happy with what is just started. We should actually be asking for more. And that's something that we need to remember, Elsa, that the fight for minorities is going to be a lifelong one. And so we have to be at it, and not just never ever be okay with that, we have reached here and now we don't have anything to do. The moment you reach there and you take rest for 10 days, the numbers would go up. So I think we need to be at it. Consistency is the only thing that will keep a check on those crimes, even if it doesn't mean that the crimes will reduce completely.
Yes, after that incident with Jyoti Singh in Delhi, a lot of digital tech came up, tech solutions, but a lot of them didn't last as well. So it is a long game We have to be resilient as activists, advocates, and we also have to take care of our own mental health because we're working on very tough issues. I know Professor Chandra has been putting some comments in the chat section. Would you like to unmute yourself and just say a few words, Professor Chandra?
Thank you. No, I was just mentioning that what Harish said is very true. Differential vulnerability is not yet recognized by our society. A widow who is differently abled from a Dalit or a minority community is extremely vulnerable at multiple levels. And, so we need to really understand this. And this is also true about, violence against women. If the victim or the survivor is actually from any of these categories, then, that person is extremely vulnerable. So we need to also make sure that, these issues are also addressed. That vulnerability reduction would necessarily mean that, we need to recognize which are the sections which are actually already, vulnerable, already victimized at multiple levels.
You're very right. I think intersectionality cannot be ignored at all. And if Christian is okay to unmute himself and speak, in the US, for example, race is a big issue, and crime against certain communities is not being tracked at a disaggregated level. So if we do not have that kind of data, how then do you, zero in on more effective solutions? Christian, do you want to say a few words?
Yes.
About
Good morning, everybody. And please forgive getting a child ready for school this morning. We're having a big problem with underreporting in general. Crime has spiked severely during this pandemic. And what we're seeing is a number of violent crime that's increasing. And now we're having young girls as young as 14 and 15 that are doing carjacking here in the States, which is an extremely troubling development. Beforehand, this pandemic last year, we had incidents of sexual violence against women that were underreported from the high schools on up into the communities that we had problems with. There's a snitch problem in our communities where families, young girls and others are threatened by gang members or community groups of boys to not tell whether violence was committed against people in their community. Murders were created. And it was a problem that started to develop into people being bullied into actually going ahead and doing crimes, partaking in looting events when we had a number of riots and protests. And we've got a number of criminal elements that have eased their way into these poorer, underserved communities that previously weren't getting a lot of attention. So some of the solutions that we've started working on with our local aldermen, congressmen, and Illinois State General Assembly reps is to not take this as a policing problem, but maybe we need to have a technology solution. So for instance, in Cook County in Chicago, where we're at, there's less than $100,000 for relocating families that want to report any crimes from murder or violent crimes against some of these very powerful and intimidating transgressors. And that is not enough for a city with millions of people to be able to relocate families that are afraid to tell the truth or to come out and speak. And so what they're looking at right now are ways that maybe we can use technologies to help, with the reporting and with the, sorry about that, to help with the reporting. So like we're looking at ways to maybe use drones, to maybe incorporate people into conceptual designs. This conversations that we're having on right now is the basis of maybe starting Safer Cities incubators locally here, that we can come up with technology, societal, and policy solutions that can converge for us to come up with some different out-the-box solutions. And it's only going to come from people in the community, and it's a charge that everyone's starting to realize has to be led by women. And I'll just leave you with one more brief point. The study shown in, I'll try to send a link to a Michigan State University study that showed that if you involve women in innovation, patent filings for inclusive innovation events, you're going to increase GDP by over 2.7%. If you involve women and minorities involved, you're going to increase GDP in your communities, your country by over 6%. So we're looking at ways to make sure that we tie in inclusive innovation along with stopping some of this violence so that we can have safer cities.
Sorry. Thank you, Christian, for sharing. And I think your child needs you. So thank you. But, this participatory methodology is so important. And I know Professor Menon also mentioned Ushahidi, and Ushahidi was what we used at the very start of our journey with Safecity, and then we evolved into what we now have, a more comprehensive platform developed with the data dark, again in a participatory framework with our users and with an empathy layer. So I'd urge everybody to check that out. And we regularly host Urban Thinkers Campus, where we bring diverse groups of people to talk about what does inclusion mean in their cities. I wanted to ask Noelia, or I think Habiba has left, but Noelia is from Costa Rica. Would you like to share anything, Noelia? Or do you want to stay silent? Okay, I think she'll stay silent. So my last question to my guests, this has been a fascinating discussion. I hope everyone thought so too. But my last question is, if you were to advise your government on the use of technology to end gender-based violence or any other kind of violence, what would be your recommendation, Tanya?
Right. I would say that in the same way that we have sort of galvanized the proliferation of financial inclusion, which means that there's a lot of increased technology in rural areas and women are able to become financially independent, start small businesses, and store their money in their cell phones without using bank accounts. We should sort of use the same methodology and the same power to now keep our cities safe, keep young girls, young women safe. And just as Christian mentioned, if you like the women, if you include these minority groups and women, your GDP will increase exponentially. So I think I would just recommend that we apply the same resources towards that, and we include the security forces and just all departments, health sector, just to come on board and keep us safe. And I think we can go a long way. So those are my closing remarks.
Thank you, Tanya. And M-Pesa really helped, many in Kenya to leapfrog the digital divide in the financial sector. And I'm sure we can think of solutions. And Ushahidi is a Kenyan solution. So please lead the way in the tech innovation for gender-based violence. Ritu, over to you. Because you also have Kenyan roots. So over to you.
And thus I shall be innovative in this space, right? It all rubs off. One of the biggest aspects, or one of the biggest spends when it comes to financial inclusion tech, fintech, is education. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent billions of dollars. To each dollar that's spent on building tech, they've spent more than $10,000 on education. So I don't think gender-based tech to end or to reduce gender-based violence should be treated in any different way. There needs to be a lot of conversation. There needs to be conversation that is uncomfortable with people who aren't quite converted, as our quorum and our audiences at the moment. So we need to get out there and we need to be talking about this. At one point, women having a bank account and access to money was as scandalous as someone having a mobile device. So we've got to get more money from donor groups to get behind the tech, and we've got to have more conversations. We've got to have the government behind us on this, because the government really pushed for financial inclusion, especially in countries such as India and Bangladesh, which I've worked on. There needs to be more government support. There needs to be more societal support. I remember in Kenya, church groups talking about M-Pesa, and how preachers would talk about M-Pesa, like, to get the community involved in financial inclusion. Can the community be involved at a similar level in ending gender-based violence and in helping reporting violence anonymously at first, since reporting violence without the layer of anonymity is quite challenging. So let's start with anonymity and then move on.
And also, you bring up a great point of who are the stakeholders you bring into the room. And I know in Kibera, in Nairobi, my partner Jane was able to get the religious leaders to look at the data that was on the crowd map. And they then preached in their sermons about this inappropriate touching and commenting and groping. And that had a big effect on the young men, because for the first time, a religious authority who they looked up to was challenging what they were doing and advising them against it. So really, you can think of innovative solutions like that too. How do you use that data? Harish, your closing remarks, and also if you can look in the chat, Osvaldo put a comment and a question. He says, we spoke about the relationship between mental health and violence, and we know mental health issues is an effect of gender-based violence. What are other relationships amongst these two, and how digital technology can help in reducing perpetration?
I think it's a very important question, but there's no simple answer to that, and there's no one solution to that. It is a multifold. You need different people to come together to provide a solution to that. I think if there is one solution that you'd ask me, it should be about awareness, 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 and awareness, and destigmatization. It should be absolutely okay for people to go out and seek assistance, and to seek those. The points where they seek assistance should be available to them at the touch of a button. So I think one is, of course, you would seek assistance for anything that you're grappling with only when when there's less of stigma, and there is less of stigma when you have everything at the touch of a button, so you don't, and you are and you're assured of anonymity at that. So that's where the Safecity app, where you are anonymous, and you can just, and at the click of a button you can report something. I think that's how technology can be an enabler. How it can discourage perpetrators is a whole different question altogether. While we are focused on reporting, we will be able to discourage people from doing something like that. One, of course, when reporting increases and people know that they could get reported, there could be a reduction of crime, or there could be an understanding that the crime is too much. Only because you've been given, you'd suddenly realize that so many people who are reporting, because suddenly the crime structures, the numbers have changed. And that's what technology sometimes does, is it sometimes eases things, and then it scares us off, because we suddenly start wondering if the whole world is a bad place where everyone is reporting so much. Do we live? So technology is only an enabler. These things existed in society before. Technology acts as an enabler. So we need to take these numbers that are reported with a lot of caution, where we need to understand that these numbers didn't emerge because of technology. Didn't emerge because we live in a bad world today. We were living in a world which was like this. The technology has just enabled these people to come out and speak, and this thing. So how do you stop perpetrating such crimes? I think awareness speak, we don't need to we need to focus only on punishment, but on reformation in the long run. How does an abuser look? How does a perpetrator look? They look like you and me. uh, who could be a perpetrator? We all in the panel could be a perpetrator. We could be victims, but we could be survivors and victims, but we also could be potential perpetrators. So to understand that perpetrators don't look like something, they look like us. Why can't Elsa be a perpetrator? Why can't I be a perpetrator? Why can't Ritu be a perpetrator? Why can't Tanya be a perpetrator? We all could be perpetrators, are not people who are these evil people who look very differently and who behave very differently. They are people like us, and that from that point we should be starting reformation. We should starting conversations. Not only from, I'm a big advocate of reformation and not just of retribution. I think that's something that we need to bring out as well, and that's when the perpetrating would stop, because of course you need to stand up and speak out and take action, and all those things are there. But after taking action, instead of wishing that that person is dead, because that person is like this horrible person, these horrible people exist in our midst. It is one of us as well, and that's an awareness that we need to bring to the fore, that these people are not from some other universe. They are people like you and me. That's something that should be brought.
Thank you. So from what I'm gathering from the entire conversation is that there needs to be investment in education right from an early age for children to help them understand their rights in particular, whether it is on sexual and gender-based violence, but also their rights online. Investment needs to be done by parents, teachers, school authorities as well to have these conversations and to be able to protect their children's rights. By government to invest in digital access for everyone, because we can't live without digital devices, but also invest in mental health facilities so that people are aware of the pitfalls of excessive use of technology as well. And finally, anonymous reporting should be encouraged because there is a value to it. And having access to this information allows for evidence based interventions at the localized level. So, with that, I think, I want to close this discussion. It was really, really fascinating. We went across various areas, but I hope that those listening would benefit from it. We've put the links in the comment section, so do feel free to reach out to us. Of course, we can't decode all of it in one session, so send us a mail if you want more information or join one of our future panels as well. Thank you so much, Tanya, Maringo, Ritu David, and Harish Iyer for joining us today.